Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session on translation services for your customer communications. My name is Greg Cheetah, and I will be your host today. Just some quick housekeeping. You can submit questions at any time, and we will be answering them at the end of the webinar. Also, this webinar will be recorded and uploaded to the Elixir YouTube page for future viewing. With that, thanks for joining. Communicating in a customer's native language can be crucial for companies to succeed in today's global economy. It not only shows that a company values their business, but also enhances the customer's experience. It builds trust and makes them feel more comfortable with the product or service being offered. It can also help bridge cultural barriers and avoid misunderstandings. And of course, there are regulated industries like healthcare that are required by law to provide member communications in the member's preferred language. Today, we're going to be discussing how translation for customer communications is evolving, requiring less effort and reducing costs. We'll look at some of the challenges of the traditional translation process and compare it to how translation happens in a modern ComOps platform. And to do this, we have an exciting guest to help us dive into a somewhat complex topic. Christian Barato, Head of Development at CQ Fluency, has over 20 years of experience in helping companies translate their critical communications into over 170 different languages. And joining Christian is Yasser Iqbal, Global Director of Pre-Sales and Solution Architects at Elixir. Yasser has over 20 years of experience in the customer communications field and has played an integral role in helping some of the largest companies in the world modernize their customer communications operations. Christian, Yasser, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Well, thanks a lot, Greg and Yasser, for arranging this webinar and for inviting me. Like you said, CQ Fluency specializes in the healthcare and life sciences industry for over 20 years. I've been in the localization industry for as long as that, but I joined the company back in late 2016, and my main mandate was to try to find a better way to handle the workload and processes that happen every year for the annual enrollment period in the healthcare industry in the US.
Thank you, Christian. Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Yasser Iqbal, and I'm the Global Director of Pre-Sales and Solutions Architecture here at Elixir Technologies. While I work with our customers, help them automate their designs and automate their communication processes, I have also had a pleasure working with Christian on a couple of major engagements with our customers to help automate their translation processes. So welcome, Christian. Thank you for joining. Over to you, Greg.
Thanks, guys. So maybe we could start off by talking a little bit about how translation has been traditionally done and what are some of the challenges related to that?
So I think I can take this up. And of course, when dealing with translating documents, certainly there are challenges associated with this traditionally. For example, if it's not done right. For example, one of the biggest challenges is ensuring accuracy and consistency across translations. It's not just about the accuracy, it also involves the cost because it's done at the very end of the process of the document generation, life cycle. Not only that, it takes a lot of time to deliver those translated materials or documents out of the gate. It is error prone. It is resource and bandwidth hungry process when you are dealing with the tight timelines and you are dealing with tons of documents that needs to be translated into multiple languages. So when you add more languages for translation, it becomes very tedious and very time-consuming process, which is very costly. But I'll let Christian take over and explain what more challenges are out there when it is done the traditional way.
Yep. So usually what happens now is that you have a period of a deep negotiation with the US government to decide what kinds of benefits and services and what are going to be the co-pays and all that kind of financial information that those plans are going to be offering to their to the end users. And this happens in a very specific time of the year. And during that moment is when the marketing teams and the business teams, they are collecting all the information and deciding what is going to go into those documents. And at the same time, they're writing the documents, right? And what happens is that these documents are being built as the information is coming in. And some plans, for example, they might need to, depending on the markets that they work with, they might have 500 different types of plans all over the United States. So based on the data, based on the negotiations, and based on how the documents should be built, they're going to generate these documents at the end. So what happens is that only after all these decisions are taken and the documents are actually generated, that's when translation can start, because these documents don't exist anywhere. They are all virtual data on databases, they are just components, right? So we only have that PDF right at the end of the process. And what happens is that PDFs are not a very good medium for translators to work with, especially because we have special tools that work with them. So what happens is that we need to recreate those PDFs into an editable format. It could be Word or InDesign or something like that. So we can then run these documents through our pipelines and send them to our translators. That means, a lot of work that needs to be redone after everything that is done on the customer side. So we can generate for each plan, we might have 3, 4, 5, 10 different languages. That means for a plan that might have 300 pages, we're going to have 300 translations per language. And if you multiply that through times 500, we're talking 15,000 pages to be worked with. And that happens at the right end of the process, right? So you have all the time crunch happening. You need to meet the CMS deadlines. And now the pressure is all over the translation company to do that. And that was my mandate at CQ, was to try to understand this process and see how we could rationalize and optimize it, so we could start earlier in the process. And that's when we started the discussions with Elixir, and we found a great partner at Elixir to get that done.
Right. And you know what? When Christian says that the PDFs are not always the best source for translating the documents, it also poses the risk of errors and losing the look and feel and the consistency in those documents. When you are dealing with static PDFs and then you're translating those, changing the layout, and when translating into Chinese or Korean, Vietnamese, Spanish, whatever language you are, it also affects your look and feel on the output document. So that's one side of it. The other is, for example, if you look at the screen, the content might be same across all those 15,000 PDFs. For example, you have a one paragraph or a one page which is just fixed for every plan. So what you are saying here is that you are translating that one page 15,000 times again and again. So that's not only an additional cost, that is also the repetition, that also requires the resources, that also requires a check and balance, from a document accuracy perspective, document quality perspective. So there are many nuances attached to it. So this is, when we are talking about this traditional translation process, it comes with a lot of repetitive task and work, that needs to happen for these documents.
Exactly. We do have some tools that try to minimize that, but you have to start by building 500 documents all over again, when you could be moving into the source of these documents and trying to work, in as a minimum as possible on those documents.
Yeah, it's my understanding too, if you wait to the very end of the process and there's a last minute change, doing a priority rush order with your translation vendor dramatically increases the cost, right? Because they got to work overtime and put a rush on it. So not being able to start the translation until the very end of the life cycle seems to be a pretty big challenge. Can you talk a little bit about how in a more modern ComOps platform translation is done and maybe kind of point out some of the key differences between the traditional way?
I can, just briefly explain you the process that how it's done in the modern ComOps platform, and then Christian, you can certainly add how you're getting the benefit or how we are bringing the efficiencies into the process. So, say for instance, if you look at the diagram on the screen. The content assets, for example, your paragraphs, your content, which is driving those documents, for example, the paragraphs, Microsoft Docx files, your templates, the look and feel, your input data, for example, your co-pays, co-insurance, benefits, all this information is rationalized and segmented upfront in the ComOps platform. And then once everything is automated, we generate the version PDFs. So let's take the example of 500 individual plans, right? So if everything is done right in the ComOps platform, like in this case, Elixir platform, the platform would just generate 500 fully compiled PDFs in English version. Now, what happens in the traditional process is that there is a review and approval process on those documents. Once those English documents are reviewed, then CQ Fluency comes into the play, and then they take those finished versions of the English documents and then start translating those documents into desired languages. Sometimes, some of the customers, they just need Spanish, but it really depends on the market that they operate in. In New York, they might be asking for Chinese and Vietnamese or any other language, right? So if you can go to the next slide. So here, what happened is that the CQ comes at the very beginning. So Christian, I would let you explain this process, that when you start early, so what are the fruits and the benefits that, becomes available for the customers?
Yeah. So one of the key benefits is that you translate something only once, and you can reuse that in the other documents. Also, if we start earlier, we can help the customer find issues in the source document that might cause problems later on in the process during translation. Because if you don't design and plan your document thinking that this is going to be translated, you're going to find situations where some kind of business rule is going to cause the translation to be not correctly assembled in the final document. You might be talking about nuances on gender, plurals, and all that stuff. So when we start earlier, we can give this feedback to the customers, to the writers, so they can rearrange the material that they are working with. So that can be a better translation. Besides that, having more time, it's always just better. We can start working almost in parallel with the original writers, and if there is anything that happens along the way, we can we have less elements to change to apply some modification. As an example, you were talking about last minute changes that happen. There is an example that happened last year from CMS when everything was decided and the documents were created. CMS came back with some rules that required the documents to be changed. So you can imagine that when we are getting to the point of building those documents so they can be translated, the originals need to be tested, changed again, and we would lose all that work that we did to recreate those documents. When you're working on the sources, if the English changes, we get a notification that the English has changed. So we change the translations accordingly using our tools. This is another advantage of working with the ComOps platform, is that we have editable elements that we can work with. We only have PDFs right at the end of the process. So every element that we have, they are translatable Word files. it's a very common format that everybody knows how to work with. So that goes back into the platform, and that's from the platform that the language PDFs are created. So you only have advantages by working earlier and inside the same platform.
Right. And, I would tie it back with the example of translating one fixed page 15,000 times, right, in the traditional process. So here, when we are looking at this process, we rationalize and optimize the content upfront. So imagine that one page would be propagated in 15,000 those pages, right? I mean, for example, those 500 PDFs, and you would not need to translate that page multiple times. You would just only need to translate it one time at the source, and then it becomes a translated source of truth for all the desired languages. For example, if it's Chinese or Korean or Vietnamese, just translate it one time and use it everywhere. So you are repurposing your translated content across the documents.
Yeah, think about the very simple change that is like changing the phone number, a contact phone number, right? You might have, for some reason, you have a new phone number for your members. If you change that in one source, that's it. It goes up. It propagates to everything. But if you need to go into the target documents and change that in them, you have to make 500 changes. So it's much more logic to go up instead of down.
So Christian, is CQ Fluency actually giving access credentials to the platform?
Yeah, what happens is that together we trained our translators and project managers to learn Elixir, to get into the platform. We have access to the same environment that the original writers have. So the experience is the same, and if there is any problem, it's the same problem. So we can speak to the original team in the same terms. We can say, okay, this is happening because this document or that document has a problem. So everybody is able to understand each other because we are in the same environment.
And you know what, Greg? When the work on those documents is started, like in the English versions of those documents, CQ team don't have to wait for the end to start their translation work on those documents. So those segmented assets, for example, paragraphs and pages, as soon as they are completed in English, CQ team have access to those content pieces. They would just fetch those content pieces, translate them, put them back into the system, and prove and verify their translated versions in parallel when the English documents are being created. So they start very early into the process. It saves a lot of time for them to catch up the look and feel related errors, or even the translation related errors. So it saves a lot of time for the team.
And as you can see, not having to rebuild anything is just a lifesaver for everybody. As you can see on the right side, there's no step of recreating that PDF so it can be translated. Everything happens on the left side, so it's a no-brainer to do that.
Nice. You talked about sort of the concept of templates, and you mentioned a term called business rules. Can you explain that to the audience?
Sure. So the Elixir platform provides one master document that contains business rules based on the data that is coming from the plans. I'm sure Yasser can have much more details on that because we don't work on that aspect of the platform. But what happens is that based on what is the intended audience of that document, a document will show or hide a specific paragraph, or inject or not some kind of variable, like the phone number. The phone number for California might be different from the phone number from New York, right? And you don't have to write that. You just say, if this is New York, show this number. If this is California, show this number. So that is a business rule inside the document. So you might have the situation where you have one paragraph that is common to all the documents, like the black paragraph that we see on the screen. That paragraph is just common to everything. But based on what is the need, you might have the red one or the blue one, and before, if we needed to change something on the black paragraph, we would have to go to the right side and change everything on the right. With the ComOps platform, you just go to the left and you change just once, and that just migrates everywhere.
Right. And Microsoft Word is the common platform used across the board for content editing, right? Writing letters or policies or documents, the generating the source content. So we have Microsoft Word plugin that makes Microsoft Word as a client to ComOps platform. So the folks who are working on creating the content, they can continue to use Microsoft Word, create their content right there in Microsoft Word. And not only that, they can also use inline business rules. So we give the capability to the users to use some very simple to use if then else kind of a comparison statements. For example, if state is New York, print this paragraph. If state is California, print this paragraph. So this way, those users can edit their content like Christian mentioned, and then proof and vet their content in Microsoft Word. That is how CQ Fluency team is also accessing those Microsoft Word paragraphs or the content pieces, and then translating those content pieces into desired languages and testing on their own, right? So they don't have to rely on anyone. So that's one of the major advantages having access to Elixir platform, and then doing kind of a self-service, right? They don't have to rely on anyone to provide them these digital assets or the finished documents.
Yeah, I was part of we did a webinar it was a couple months ago on content creep, where we talked specifically about business rules and templates and how that can really dramatically impact the operation. I know there was a customer that we took on that I had like 3,000 different documents because they weren't using the concept of templates. And we came in and I think we got it down to six main templates from 3,000. So it's pretty powerful once you start implementing the concept. So it sounds to me like there's a lot of value in doing translation in a more modern ComOps platform. I think on the next slide, we've got a couple key highlights of what the value props are. So we talked about doing it at the very beginning of the process, involving the translation vendor with the ComOps vendor, with the customer, and kind of creating that collaborative team. What are some of the other big value drivers that you see in doing it this way?
I think, as you can see, it's pretty evident when you have to deal with fewer content to translate. Obviously, there is a cost saving, right? Then when you are dealing with timelines and putting more resources to comply with those timelines, right? And you are supposed to translate a lot of content, of course there is a cost benefit there if you start this process early, so you don't need more resources to perform that work, right? Those are the things that are associated with the cost. But not only that, you are also able to automate and scale your operations, right? For example, when you are growing your operations across multiple markets, there may be a request to do more and more languages. If the process is not automated, that means you are on the wrong track, right? So the automation allows you to add more plans seamlessly. You are just translating the source of the source of truth, for example, fewer digital assets, and then continue to add more languages. But I would let Christian also speak to it.
Yes. So, like you said, having making a change in just one piece of assets of document is it's crucial, because you make sure that everything that depends on that asset is just done. You don't need to map that. Right now, if you think about the old times, if a phone number would change, going back to the phone number, you will need to make sure to go over all the translated documents. Imagine we have done all the work. right? We went back and we have now, let's say, 3 languages time 500. It's 1,500 documents, and we know that a phone number has changed. So we don't know which plans in which languages they need to apply because we don't have those rules. We just need to go over 1,500 documents and understand which market they are directed to, and then edit those documents. Otherwise, we would have to do all the work all the time. So just that, I know these things happen at the end of the process all the time. There's always some minor change happening. Minor changes can be overwhelming because they happen all over the place. It's not just like big things, complex things. A problem, we might make a translation mistake, and we need to go over and change everything, right? So consistency, single sourcing, the low complexity of having a document that you can create yourself. You don't need anyone too much specialized in anything to build those documents, and having a document that we can work with, like having Word documents right from the beginning, feeding in our translation memories, which is a tool that we use to store all those translations so we can reuse, is very important, because next year that is going to happen again. You have a new enrollment period, and we want to make sure that the exact content that has been translated has been stored in our databases so we can reuse that. That also saves a lot of money and time to do those documents again. Right. So I only see advantages on that. It's really, I don't know how we've been working without this for so long. And I understand why CQ told me that my priority was to go after that, because it's really insane to not do that.
Right. And you know what? It's an interesting point that you made, that the year over year you store the already translated content into some kind of a translation memory at your end. So you don't have to repeat the translation for already translated content. So just keep this thing in mind. So next year, if there are some changes that are brought as a part of those, already translated contents, you are just translating the delta or the newer content that's been introduced. You don't have to retranslate the content that's already there. So that's another advantage that that we see in this approach. And of course, it's a very easy to use for the line of business users who are working on creating these content pieces. It's self-serviceable platform. Very intuitive business user interface, like I explained in a Microsoft Word plugin. You start the process very early, so it's high quality. It's a very simplified QA process. You get more time to test your deliverables before they are sent out of the gate.
Well, I know we're coming up on time. We could talk about this probably for hours. I appreciate you guys spending the time. But before you go, I think we have a few questions that came in or were pre-submitted. Maybe you could take some time and help us answer these. The first one is, and maybe Christian, we'll put this one to you. Do all ComOps platforms handle translation the same? That was actually one question I had. I know you work with multiple ComOps vendors, not just Elixir. Do they all do it the same?
Oh, yeah, absolutely not. Although they are all very advanced, the problem that we see is the architecture of the platform itself. Because in order to allow translations to be part of the process, you need to design that system to accommodate those extra elements, the translated assets, the translated paragraphs, and so they can build the material from the start. And what we see now is that it's a combination, right? Some of the platforms are just tools, and they're just imposed for use, and we don't have much saying in that process. So it's a customer that just uses the tool and CQ, here it is how you're going to work. So there is no coordination and collaboration between the teams so we can improve that process. Contrary to what we see in Elixir, right? We are here talking. Before we got into this webinar, there was like years of collaboration between our teams and seeing what we can do, what we cannot do, and building a better process together, right? It's not something that is just imposed. So there's that. So it's not everything. It's not everything is the same. They might work for English, but when you throw translation in the mix, you get all sorts of problems. Databases that don't accept multilingual content. You don't have the business logic to accept those translations. So we end up having to work with the PDFs, which is still a problem.
This is one that I was actually curious about. Is there a limit to how many languages can be translated? And I guess Yasser from an Elixir side and Christian from a CQ Fluency, is there any limit?
So from Elixir platform perspective, the platform is Unicode compliant. We are across the globe. We have customers in Europe. We have customers in Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa. So left to right languages or right to left languages, for example, Arabic, and all those languages, they are today being produced by our customers. So it's Unicode compliant. Almost all the languages are supported in the platform.
Yeah, if that's Unicode, you can do anything. You can even do Klingon because Unicode has Klingon compatibility.
Okay, let's see. I think we kind of beat this one up, but is there anything you want to add to do we have to translate all the assets every time?
Absolutely not. You just go to the source, you kill it at the source. You don't let it grow. Just
in a modern ComOps platform, traditional operations you do, right?
Yeah, it can be complicated because so much might happen between. Although we do translate the recompiled documents in our translation memories, the way those documents are recreated might be different from year to year, and that causes slight differences on the content. So you might not have 100% matches from what we have on the database. Also, if you make changes after the fact and you don't populate the translation memory, that change is lost. So if you go, let's say, phone numbers again, if you are on a crunch, you need to make a change, and you change 200 of the 1,500 documents, and you do that directly on the PDF because you need to deliver that in the next 2 hours. That might not go into the TM. So next year, when you reapply things, you might not have that change in the database, so that is lost. And if you don't track that the error will go over the document again.
Well, I think we are out of time, so I appreciate you spending your time with us. On the next slide, we have where you can get a hold of either Yasser or Christian. If you've got any questions that weren't answered on this, feel free to reach out to them directly. They'd be happy to answer any questions. With that, thanks for joining. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.